morning. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline today on October 26, 2022. We've got a real interesting show today, a bit of insider baseball, but some real interesting nuggets. Really focused today particularly on Alberta. As usually, I'm joined by Western Standard news editor Nigel Hannaford. How are you, Nigel?
Good, thank you. And yourself?
Any better than I'd be on vacation.
Sounds good.
Also joined by Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan. Cory, survived the bear attack okay?
So far, he's still harassing us. Like you said, he tore our fence down last night. The battle goes on.
Shoot, shovel, and shut up.
It might come to that.
Yeah. Although maybe I shouldn't have said that on air.
A neighbor might do that.
Shame. Okay. Well, we've got an interesting show. A far left, the editor of a far left Alberta publication, Progress Alberta, or Progress Report, has been criminally charged for vandalizing a monument to a Ukrainian commander who fought against the Soviet Union and the Nazis in the Second World War. I have a feeling he's more angry about the fighting the Soviet Union part of that equation. The best part is this guy, he wrote about it the next day, shocked that this happened, largely glorifying this act of proletarian insurrection. But he wrote about it the next day on his lefty publication. It's a bit of a head scratcher if the allegations prove true in court. And then the UCP convention was last weekend, Friday to Sunday. The Western Standard was there. We had a number of reporters. I was up there myself as well. A lot of really interesting things going on. Danielle Smith introducing her cabinet, her first big speech to the party membership at the convention, and a bit of an insurrection by a large group of the membership taking over the board of that party. And there's a lot of implications to that. That sounds super inside baseball, but I'm asking you to please bear with me. Stay with me. Some of this stuff is going to have real effects on Alberta politics. Before we get into it, though, we got to thank my favorite sponsor, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Yeah, I know you've heard me say it a million times. I've been a member of the CSSA for over a decade because I trust them to stand up for my rights as a law-abiding firearms owner in Canada. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association is standing up for the right of firearms owners to own, to purchase, and to safely use their firearms in Canada. Without the work the CSSA has done, I'm sure the Trudeau gun bans would have been implemented long ago. We'd have no firearms left, legally at least, in this country. So if you're not yet a member of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, you really need to go to CSSA-CILA.org right now. Click on membership, become a member. It's worth every penny. Don't free ride on the support of other gun owners who are already members of the CSSA in Canada. You need to join them. They need the resources to defend your rights. It's an excellent investment. Speaking of excellent investments and membership, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go do it right now. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. Go to westernstandard.news, click on membership. You'll get unlimited access to all Western Standards, bailout-free, government bailout-free content. You're going to love it. All right, so let's get into it. This came across the wire last night. We got kind of our internal chat. This came up that Duncan Kinney, he is executive director of Progress Alberta and the editor, if I got that right, of the Progress Report. These things are ideologically and personally related to Press Progress. I know it's so much progress, but they are different legal entities. So Progress Alberta, this organization, it is a NDP and union affiliated organization, kind of builds itself as an activist group to the, I think they describe themselves as far to the left of the NDP to pull them even closer to in the direction of workers' paradise. And then they have their publication, the Progress Report. So this guy, he's been around for a long time. He's talked about punching conservatives in the face and things like that. In 2001, there was an attack on a monument. I can't pronounce the guy's name. I won't even try. was an attack on a monument to some commander of the Ukrainian Insurgency Army. The Ukrainian Insurgency Army was an armed sort of militia that fought against, you can remember, this is coming right of Holodomor. Up to that point, probably the biggest act of genocide in world history, soon to be overtaken by the Holocaust, but up until that point, the biggest. They would fought against the Soviet Union. They at times fought against Nazi Germany. But at that time, the Soviet Union was, for Ukrainians, was generally perceived as a more immediate threat, considering it was in the process of liquidating Ukrainians. So there's a statue of a commander of this army, and someone painted and put in red paint across it, "Actual Nazi." And then there was another attack on another Ukrainian monument, calling them Nazis as well, something to the effect, the same day. The day after, or something to that effect, Duncan Kinney, Progress Alberta, wrote a big long screed about this. Hey, someone has leaked me photos of this attack.
Great exclusive pictures.
Great exclusive. Mm-hmm. Someone got exclusive pictures of this attack. So they had a real scoop. And he wrote a big thing about it, more or less justifying it, saying these guys fought against the Soviets, and because the Soviets were at war with the Germans, therefore these guys were Nazis. Odd logic, but it's the logic he used. Fast forward to last night. Duncan Kinney, charged by the Edmonton Police Service with, wait for it, committing the act, the criminal act of vandalism himself, that he had the great scoop on the next day. I'll start with you, Cory. You know who this guy is. I think you've even had some run-ins with him.
I have, and I've written about him. I mean, he's had a history of stunts. I don't even want to revisit the history and whether or not the statue was of a decent guy or if he was a monster.
Yeah.
That's not the point. It's on private property as well. It should be noted. This isn't some public space statue. This was on some Ukrainian Association cemetery, I believe, or something like that.
Yeah.
And just the bizarreness of Kinney, should he have been the one who did it? But if you look at his history, he had to put out quite a letter of apology after he slandered the Weber Academy. That led him into the legal soup, and he had to put out that letter, which I tweeted recently. If people want to review it, it's well worth reading. And I think Kaylin Ford has also got him.
I'm not sure. I could be getting this. There's so much progress.
I did check. It's listed. Even him himself is one of the ones she listed. Now, where that's going, I don't know or not. But he's pushed the limits. He's a very far left, extreme activist, and it's catching up with them. You know, you can't get away with all of that with impunity. And whether he did this or not, I guess the courts will decide. But I mean, looking at the guy's history and other things, I won't be terribly shocked if he's found guilty.
Nigel, what came to mind to me with this was, how do you square this in your mind? And I'm thinking maybe he thinks of himself as Clark Kent working at the world. What's Clark Kent's paper called in Superman? The Daily or
Daily Globe, or I don't know.
Yeah. So Clark Kent, who's a journalist, a reporter. Clark Kent writing about the exploits of Superman. If Superman was a two-bit Marxist petty thug. Mm-hmm. You've been in the media business a long time. But you're
well, it's okay.
You've been in the media business.
It feels like a long time.
You've been in it longer than I have.
Yes.
Have you ever seen a journalist, or someone who calls himself a journalist at least, do something in secret and then report on it like the next day?
No, I haven't. And but what I have seen is a long list of journalists who have invented fake stories. And as we are talking about the situation between Russia and the Ukraine, then we can take ourselves into the whole business of the New York Times and its reporting on, you mentioned the Holodomor just now. Yes, they had a journalist there by the name of Walter Duranty. He occupied the Moscow bureau for the New York Times for 14 years and won a Pulitzer Prize for the reporting. He completely ignored the ethnic destruction of approximately 4 million.
You're talking during the Stalin era.
Yeah, this is in the Stalin era. Yeah. So now we have this story about Roman Shukavich. Then this is like Cory, to try and get into the history of this thing. And was he a good guy or a bad guy? It all depends who you ask.
Yeah.
How would
It's
we
a
know?
complicated
We weren't
period.
there. This is a period of time when the Nazis were blamed for the Katyn massacre, later turned out to be the Soviet Union. How would we know? But what we do know, what I know anyway, you asked me, have I ever seen anything like this before? No, I haven't. The closest thing I can see to it is, if it is true as charged, is the case just a couple of years ago of Jesse Smollett, the film star who faked
Justice Smollett or
Juicy Smollett.
Juicy, whatever.
J-U-S-S-I-E.
Justice for Juicy.
Yeah.
I'm better on the Ukrainian stuff.
Oh, yeah.
On the pronunciations, but at any rate, faked a hate crime against himself.
Yeah.
And he actually went down for 150 days for that.
Yeah. That caught my mind too. I know we were talking about the Juicy Smollett thing. If you haven't seen the Dave Chappelle skit, or not skit, his bit on Justice for Juicy Smollett, it's one of the best pieces out there. It's but yeah, he had committed a fake hate crime against himself to elicit sympathy. This is, well, it's both worse than that and not as bad as that. It's worse than that in that he didn't commit the fake hate crime against himself here. He destroyed someone else's property. This was private property. It may have been like the Ukrainian youth organization of some kind, but it was private property. He destroyed someone's property to do it. But it's...
Well, I think the distinction is that in the case of Juicy Smollett, you could have got serious civil unrest falling out of that. I mean, people could have been hurt, killed, police involved. That was a pretty...
but maybe indirectly people were hurt from it because it increases hatred towards
exactly. Well,
mega people and Trump and police. And...
But this instance here, if it turns out to be as charged, well, okay, the Ukrainian community is offended, but they will certainly have their satisfaction if that's the way the case goes, and pretty much ends there. We don't need.
But will it be the end of Kinney? I guess that's the question.
Well, I don't know. We've had reporters on it. I don't think we've heard any confirmation yet if he's even still got his job. I mean, he's not convicted of anything yet, but you'd think at the end, like this is the
probably love him, Derek. I mean, it's a slow news day, and he goes out and makes some news.
But you're not supposed to get caught doing it. You're not supposed to get caught. So, like, this is the single, probably most unethical thing you can do if it happened in journalism. Commit a crime and then report on it and pretend you had nothing to do with the crime. I cannot think of, now I suppose it could be worse if it was even more serious crime.
Or if money changed hands, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, if I
it
went
was
out,
an arson or something dangerous, but it wasn't that.
If I went out tomorrow and like killed a guy and then I had the scoop, I'm like, hey, I got the picture of the body and the story of what happened. Well, I suppose that'd be worse because that's a much more serious crime, but it is the most unethical thing you could do. So I cannot see how some people who at least bill themselves as journalists could keep him there. At the very least, you know, he's got to take a step aside until a trial settles the matter. But I don't think they even really they only publicly fashion themselves as journalists. They're propagandists. This is Alberta's cheap Walmart Zeller's knockoff of Pravda. Like they're propagandists. They just do hit jobs.
And he's a fellow at the Broadbent Institute as well, which I would suspect they might want to.
That's a who's who of the NDP in Canada.
Sort of flush their pipes of the likes of him.
The thing is, if they had any credibility to lose,
well, that's it.
It would cost them. But I don't honestly think that anybody takes them terribly seriously when they break a story.
No.
Well, I'll disagree with you on that. The mainstream media regularly pick up the stuff they do. Like when, I forget if it was Progress Alberta, Progress Report, or Press Progress. I mean, they're corporately different, but they're the same thing. Really. I forget which one did it, but they were a big part of the hit job on Kaylin Ford. You know, Kaylin Ford was a UCP conservative candidate in the last provincial election. They slandered her as a Nazi, absolutely bizarre stuff.
Terrible character assassination.
Yeah, it was just character assassination. They put this stuff out, and the mainstream media picked it up, swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, and reprinted it without terribly much question. And they've done it on a bunch of other stuff, mostly different character assassination stories. And they'll have like a thread of something to pull on. You can't invent it out of thin air, but they'll put out a couple of threads, arrange it in such a way, and the media will pull on it. I don't think reasonable people reading it would take them very seriously, but they have influence in the sense that they can get the mainstream media to pick up on their stories, and that's where people consume their content indirectly through the mainstream media.
So we're going to have to go and look it up and see whether the mainstream media, in citing a source for their story on Caelan Ford, mentioned a far left propagandist news agency lookalike.
Charged with what some would argue would be kind of a hateful crime against Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, either way, I mean, I just, can't help but like it after such a long history of basically social media thuggery out of this guy. He's just not a good character, and it looks good on him.
Okay, well, that closes our section on Alberta Pravda. This just past weekend, the United Conservative Party held its first ever convention without Jason Kenney as leader or in attendance. A very interesting weekend. It opened immediately before the convention. The government put out a news release announcing the new cabinet at around 12:45 on Friday. And 15 minutes after that, I sat down with Alberta's new premier, Danielle Smith, and we chatted for an hour. Questions of my own, some from the comments section, which, by the way, we can confirm is going to be a regular bit. Not sure if we're going to. Not sure. Yeah, we're probably not doing it this Friday, but we're going to have Danielle Smith on every Friday for question period with the premier here. But we spent an hour going through it. Spent a lot of the time on the cabinet. So let's talk about her cabinet picks here. It's a big cabinet, isn't it, Nigel? 27
members. I think that's a few more. I'm not a big fan of big cabinets.
Plus a ton of parliamentary secretaries.
But I can see why people do it. I mean, it's not just Premier Smith. It's generally speaking, you have a large cabinet.
She set a record for Alberta, though. This is the biggest.
Well, this is saying I'm not a fan, but this is it's easy to see what the temptation is. You've got a party that has just come through a 6-month fight. There's still some hard feelings, even though
I'd say it's a 2-year fight because it was a big fight to get rid of Kenney and then 6 months to replace him.
That's actually true. Yeah. So obviously, despite a quite convincing show of unity on Saturday with Brian Jean and Travis Daves coming out and standing there and saying all the right things through gritted teeth, it was nevertheless a convincing performance, but they're still out there. There are still hard feelings. Give everybody a job, something to do, a reason to stay loyal. I can see what the argument for a larger cabinet would be. Don't have to like it.
Yeah.
So that's, but as for the actual composition of it, it was very well put together. A mix of the old and the people who had experience, which, by the way, is important.
It was mostly, though. She left most of the cabinet intact. Some people that she left in their positions or returned, like Travis Taves, returned to their positions. Kept Shandro in Justice. Those are two of the big ones. Some people got moved around, like Sonia Savage. Some people booted, some people in. But it was, for the most part, fairly status. I thought it was a very status quo cabinet, considering Danielle was coming in as very much an insurgent, shaking it up, and then she shook up the cabinet. But it was a cabinet shuffle. It wasn't a new cabinet.
No, you'd have to be a diehard rebel to look at that and say, well, that just isn't my cabinet. You should be able to live with that, even if you didn't vote for Danielle Smith in the leadership campaign, didn't support her as a member of caucus. Should be able to live with it.
What were your big takeaways from the new cabinet?
Well, similar to what Nigel's saying. I mean, she's buying caucus peace. And I guess perhaps the phases move, though, because she's still speaking some pretty militant, language about shaking up the government, going after AHS, fixing that. Still stuck on, very focused on the Sovereignty Act, things like that. But I think perhaps she's done rattling the party tree for a while, let it settle down for a while. And yes, the politically, the easiest way to do it is to toss as many bones as possible as you can to the caucus. It's a fractious caucus. It's sensitive. And I got a feeling you won't see her shake up that party until post-election, presuming they win after the election. And then maybe she would be starting to put much more of her own mark. But very pragmatic that way. I mean, there's a lot of Kenney loyalists. I mean, he was kicked out in a vote, but that was 51%.
51 of 50% of a pretty rigged vote where they changed the rules half a dozen times.
But there's still some people that were not too thrilled with that whole thing. And if it looked like a full flush of Kenny's presence, it would probably lead to some problems. She can't afford to have that happening with only 6 months now until an election hits. So I don't like seeing it either. I'm a big fan of small government. I'm hoping that this will change, but I can, as Nigel's saying, I can see why it was done.
So you're talking about throwing a bone. Let's talk about one guy who really got boned.
Nixon.
Jason Nixon. Jason Nixon was really, within the caucus at least, the right-hand man of Jason Kenney. He was the House leader. So he shepherds the bills through the legislature and whatnot. Minister of Environment. And then while Taves was running for the leadership, he was also Minister of Finance. But really, even though Minister of Finance generally thought to outrank Minister of Environment, Nixon was the right-hand man there. He is now deep on the backbenches. I'm not sure where his seat is, if he's out sitting on the Siberia side of the House, but he's now on the backbenches. No cabinet role whatsoever. He's on a committee, that's it. I think definitely if there was a sacrificial lamb that like we're cleaning house, that was it.
Well, let me throw a completely wild speculation, say, on some of the wheelings and dealings that happen when it comes to cabinet things. One of the most prickly members she brought into it was Brian Jean. I was kind of surprised. He's been conciliatory. He's sitting in the cabinet. He's staying around, at least at the very least, till the next election. But I bet Brian Jean would be grinning from big ear to big ear with the thought of Nixon being pushed out. So if there was, I'll give you cabinet peace as long as he's not in it, that could have been some of the negotiations that are going on too.
I do have a hard time imagining the two being there, considering how personal and visceral the relationship is between them with dealings in the last leadership race, the time that the Kenney came in. One name I expected to see him at. One I was watching to see, I think all of us were watching to see, was Shandro. So Shandro, we all remember, was Minister of Health during lockdowns and the imposition of vaccine passports. Made himself, I think it's fair to say, fairly unpopular with a very large number of Albertans, particularly more conservative Albertans. He was shuffled eventually to justice by Kenney. But Smith left him there. Now, he's not doing the harm that he did in AHS. I don't really know how he's doing in justice. For all I know, he's a great justice minister. But a large number of her supporters, particularly people who hated mandates, who hated lockdowns and things like this, he was after Kenney, enemy number one. Were you surprised to see him stay in cabinet?
Actually, I was not. No, he's a capable man, even if you don't like. There are some people, if you give them a job, they go off and do it, and then there are other people who that's not true about. But I think that Mr. Shandro, when he's given his marching orders, as a commissar, he'll get you there. And justice, not a bad place for him to be. He's got some challenges coming up, has he not? With the
he's got a hearing with the Alberta Law Society surrounding some of the things he did as health minister. He's alleged to have gone up to a doctor on his driveway and yelled at him and used the AHS database to get the personal cell phones. Various things, I don't know if any of which are proven, but they're alleged, and I'm not even sure if they're denied, but he's up for review by the Alberta Law Society while he's the justice minister. I've never heard of this before.
No, that's a very unusual situation. And, the only thing I can think of is, maybe Premier thought, I don't need to do anything about this. This will take care of itself after Christmas. That's possible.
Yeah. Any big surprises for you in the cabinet between who's in and who's out?
I mean, I actually would have thought Shandro would have been out, though. He does carry a lot of baggage that you don't necessarily want to embrace. I mean, he infuriated people on left and right as health minister. And in justice, well, he hasn't done badly. Perhaps he's doing very well with the file. But just that one I would have thought, for the sake of looking like a bit of a fresh start, maybe even shuffle him to a more junior position.
Well, she did chop his job up into three parts, though. He's justice minister. He was justice minister, and he is justice minister. But that department, speaking of cabinet inflation, is now broken up, also separate attorney general and minister of public safety. Public safety pulls in a few other things like emergency relief, but public safety will take part of the justice minister portfolio as well. So
it's so big now she could split a lot of cabinet roles, though. And Casey Madhu was one I can see the political reasons. He's your only Edmonton MLA, but he's also got a massive amount of baggage on the go right now. I mean, he really blew it when in justice. And she's still, it was a tough decision, I'm sure. I mean,
Well, he was a curious one. I mean, he's got some controversy with what happened while he was justice minister and that traffic ticket. Well, not the traffic ticket itself, but trying to get out of the traffic ticket. But I mean, the only UCP MLA from Edmonton proper.
And he was a staunch Smith loyalist throughout the campaign.
He's fairly conservative.
Yeah.
So she also made him deputy premier. In fact, she has 2 deputy premiers. Kenny had no deputy premier at all. Smith appointed Casey Madu from Edmonton and then Nathan Newdorf from Lethbridge. So 2 deputy premiers. Now, I tend to think a deputy premier is sort of like a vice president of the United States, except even if the leader dies, you still don't get to go to power. It's really kind of token.
Yeah, I mean, they kept Herb Gray there forever with the federal Liberals, for example, just because he was an established long-term member, but he didn't have the capability to manage a large cabinet portfolio anymore.
Generally what they'll do more likely is they answer for the head of the government when they're not in the House. So Rachel Notley had a deputy premier, Sarah Hoffman. Her main job, I think, as deputy premier was when Rachel Notley's not there, she answers her questions in question period. That was really good. But I suppose you might empower them. I mean, look at the United States. Kamala Harris does not appear to have particularly much power. Joe Biden didn't have any power as vice president, but Dick Cheney had more power than the president. So it's really what you make of the office and really what the senior guy does in terms of delegating power.
Well, I'm thinking back to 1963 here, but Lyndon Johnson was a very ordinary vice president right up until the time that Kennedy was assassinated, at which point he became president, and there was a very easy transition. So I guess if the premier is pulled offline for some reason, the deputy premier would fulfill that function. Question is, which one? Nathan Newdorf or?
Well, the deputy premier can be sent to represent the premier at events. Oh, we have to cut a ribbon for this bridge opening. Well, if it's in the north, you send Casey. If it's in the south, you send Newdorf.
You do that.
Yeah, but in Canada, if God forbid a premier or prime minister was ever assassinated like JFK, the deputy premier or deputy prime minister doesn't necessarily there's an order of precedence. But if that happened, what would happen is the governing caucus would immediately meet and they'd look at each other and say, Cory's premier.
Interim anyway until they can.
Yeah, until a leadership race or something. But that's the way that would work. We'd probably go a few days without a real prime minister. But there'd be an order of precedence where someone does the duties of that person. Either way, we've got, I think for the first, I've never heard of a province having 2 deputy premiers, but.
Yeah, it looks good on a business card. And it just it's more roles to give people in an area where they're probably not going to do much damage.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's.
I was just going to say the other thing about some of these appointments, which people are puzzled about, is that Premier Smith is actually not a vindictive person.
No.
I think that she probably believes, and I hope she's right, that if you try to work with people, people will come around and will work with you. And so there is kind of grace and forgiveness, and I believe she did use the phrase, wipe the slate clean.
She used that the night that she was elected UCP leader.
She was elected. We were all down there. So it could be actually a personality thing with her, that she's not the kind of person who's going to say, right, you are against me, I'm going to just screw you so hard as I can.
She does not appear to have used the cabinet to settle scores and be vindictive.
She does not.
In fact, some people were talking about Chandra. I mean, if she was going to settle a score, she definitely would have taken him. She left him there. Well, let's talk about someone or a group of people who do appear to be out to settle a score. Take Back Alberta. Take Back Alberta, some of you guys might know, you guys do, is kind of a grassrootsy organization, kind of within the UCP orbit, and it goes out and just mobilizes people, gets them signed up to do stuff in political parties, or the UCP, I should say. It played a very significant role in the takedown of Jason Kenney. It was out there signing people up. Actually, let's back up a little bit. The last UCP convention, November 2021, the Grey Eagle Casino on Tsutsina Reserve, just next to Calgary here. Jason Kenney was bragging, my slate of candidates swept the table. No one even came close. This talk of challenging my leadership is all a paper tiger made up mostly by the Western Standard. Well, we knew better than that. But some of the media bought that. Like, they swept the board. The UCP board, half of it comes up for election every time. plus some vacancies, kind of like the U.S. Senate, kind of never turns over all at once. And his people swept the table, but the people against them weren't even really trying. It kind of made them overconfident, which is why they didn't see the big leadership challenge coming. So then Take Back Alberta comes, and it signed up a ton of people and played a pretty big role in what was supposed to be the in-person vote on Kenney's leadership in Red Deer. They had beaten Kenney about 4-1, 3 or 4-1. Then they canceled that and changed the voting stuff. Anyway, Kenney still goes down. Take Back Alberta seems back again, and it showed up in force at this convention. It seems to both influence the policy votes, but more particularly to elect a new board of directors for the party. That board was rightfully or wrongly perceived as Kenney's board, and they swept it. There was 9 positions up, and they took every single last one. So that was half the board up for re-election plus some vacancies. So these guys now hold a majority on the board of directors. And they seem to have been a little less forgiving than Smith. They came in looking to now shake up the party's establishment and governing body itself, their board. Cory, you've been around internal politics a long time, less so with the UCP, but you kind of understand how these things work. Have you ever seen like an outside group come like this to a major party? Not like we could take over the Alberta Green Party in an afternoon.
Yeah,
you, me, and Nigel can go when we take outvote them at the AGM.
No, and I've seen them try with blocks. There have been advocacy groups that have tried, or slates and things like that, but not something on such a large order with that many voting members to manage to do it. But there's a whole lot. I mean, a party board, a lot of people don't necessarily understand what the board does. I mean, you get policy discussions through the party, for example. Okay, well, all those really are to caucus or suggestions. In reality, they're bound by them. But still, the leadership should nod and respect the board, because the board is supposed to be the conduit from the members to the leader, in a sense. I mean, it's very mixed up, as well as the sort of constituency boards. Yeah, it's internal. And the fights can get bad, though. See, I was a VP membership during most of the time. Danielle Smith was the leader of the Wildrose Party. And then we had a lot of clashes with Smith at that time, because she wants her independence to go out, and we felt as board members, and I think we were wrong in hindsight as board members, you get a little too self-important that you should be telling the leader what to do. And that could lead to bad breaks within your party and frustrations. And I think those are some of the seeds that led to, again, that floor crossing eventually. So the relationship between the board and the leadership now with Take Back Alberta, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to come out of this and what's going to happen. Hopefully it's positive, though. Well,
it's not just an advisory board. Like the policies, Kenney says, I hold the pen on policy. But the board is different. I view it as almost the legislative branch of a political party internally. It is the governance of the party. They set the rules on leadership races. They set
nominations.
On nominations. And I think that we're going to come to that in a second. Nominations aside, which we're going to get to, do you think there's any significant fallout from this? Do you think this kind of very clear and open, they made no bones about it, like we're Wildrose types and we think the current board are PC types and we're coming in and taking it over. Their executive director, David Parker, told Rick Bell of Calgary Sun, this is the Wildrose is back. The Wildrose is in charge now. The PC's had it. Now the Wildrose does. Do you think this is going to maybe ruffle too many feathers?
Well, that might. But
I thought it was rather brash language, but
like win, but don't rub it in. But anyway, I would imagine that the premier would probably find that a fairly congenial group of people to hear from. It's one of the funny things that, and you can see this with some of the reaction to this already, takeover by this shadowy group of men in dry suits,
lends to mistrust.
And yet, we always tell people to get involved in politics. If you believe in something, go out, join, act, do. Mm-hmm. And these people did. They went out, they joined, they acted, and they did. They took over the board. And so
wasn't hidden.
They weren't also they weren't shadowy about it. Like they were very open about it, and then bragged about it in the newspapers. They were very open about it.
So why would anybody say, well, this is a dangerous thing, internal takeover and so on? Well, I mean, there'll be another chance to elect a different board in due course.
It's just normally done, I think, a bit more congenially. It's there's always slates on these things, essentially different teams competing and they're aligning with each other, but it's kind of a little more hush than this was, and not bringing in so many new people. I mean, you'd see, I was there and I recognized, okay, this guy's been like a PC for 30 years. This guy was Wild Rose for 10, and then there was just a bunch of guys and flannel walking in you've never seen before, and I know who they're voting for.
Well, I hope the people on the board, though, and in the party, just in hindsight and experience, like it was a smaller version, but the Wild Rose Party was the merger of the Alberta Alliance in a Wild Rose group. And some of us never got over that. They were still self-identifying. I was an Alliance person, and Link Byfield was a Wild Rose person. We used to fight based on that. And I look back and boy, we fought over the stupidest of crap because we were still holding our tribalism rather than looking at the whole party.
Speaking of which, his brother, Vince Byfield, he's a part of those new members.
Carrying the torch. But the thing is that people say, well, it's been taken over. It doesn't take over the government.
No.
When you are elected as an MLA, you are elected as a representative for a constituency. You happen to belong to this party, and it's probably what gets you elected. But in the end, you work within a constitutional structure into which the board of the party does not feed in any sense.
These things influence government, but it's not taking over a government. You're taking over the governing body of the governing party. It's different. Okay,
They will get their phone calls returned. But
so let's talk about what's probably most on the minds of these people coming in. So in the interview I had with Premier Smith on the Friday, I asked about, there's some very controversial nominations that have already been kind of snapped in ridings with Kenny loyalists, where their opponents were all disqualified on what seems some pretty flimsy grounds. Probably the most, we had Jody Gateman and Carson Siksika, and probably most prominently Tim Hoven in Remy Rocky Mountain House Sundry with Jason Nixon. And I asked Smith about, okay, what's happening with reopening these nominations? This was talked about during the leadership. She said, it's not really up to me. It's up to the party's board. The leader does not have the power to just snap their fingers. Now, a leader can get what they want if they really want to push hard enough. But I got the impression she wasn't going to expend too much political capital on it. But she said it's up to the board, and if the members want these nominations open, they're going to have to elect a board that wants to do that. That appears to be exactly what's happened. So nominations reopening. Let's start with you. Let's start with Cory, because I think you got a bit more background on this one. What are the chances that Jason Nixon has to face a contested nomination now with an opponent that doesn't get disqualified?
I think quite good. That could be part of why he was jettisoned from caucus too. I mean, that's the
from
large
cabinet, not caucus.
Or cabinet, I should say. Yes, thank you. And that was part of what Smith campaigned on as well, was saying she would reevaluate those, and that was one of the most odious. I mean, Tim Hoven was not a radical, racist or any of that kind of garbage.
Yeah, it was made up.
He was kicked out on shaky grounds. It was insulting, and there were thousands. I think estimates were as many 1,400 local memberships sold there. She needed those for that leadership. This is kind of returning that favor, saying, well, you can have that nomination, and I think Nixon will have a very hard time winning it.
It's not. She's still kind of wash her hands,
No,
saying but if the board wants,
we know unofficially the board. Either way, the board would be more inclined to reopen that one. Mm-hmm. Jody Gateman with a show down south. It was similar circumstance, but not quite.
Well, she kept Joseph Schau in cabinet, minister with a portfolio and House Leader. Pretty good gig.
So whether or not, again, as you said, it's not up to her. And if the board says it, she can say, look, that's the party governance, it's just the board, and Joseph will just have to go out and sell memberships and win it. Mm-hmm. But I do think at least one of those has to reopen, just for the sake of giving that feeling that we're correcting some of the past wrongs.
Nigel, how divisive do you think it'd be opening it up? Is it going to be seen as correcting past wrongs and the grassroots getting their say, or do you think it's going to be viewed as vindictive and a purge?
Oh, it's probably going to be a 50-50 split on that. But my bet, if I had to take money, or if there was an office pool on it, would be, if you have spent the last 10 months actively campaigning to take over the board because you were mad about the way things are done, and one of the things that makes you maddest is the way that nominations were, as you see it, rigged. why would you do all that and come all that way and spend all that money and all that effort and all that door knocking and all those times in cold church basements and then say, well, I guess in the interest of everything, we'll just, of course they're going to open the nominations up.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they? That's the most obvious thing in the
If they
world.
aren't pushing that, why did you get it in the board? I mean,
Smith might be trying to calm the waters and get everyone singing Kumbaya, but I have a feeling these guys aren't. These guys aren't paid. They're volunteers, and yeah, they've been doing this for
That's right.
damn near a year.
Yeah, there's a lot of effort to go and just say, well, you got to start cutting this crap out.
So let's
Next
talk.
time.
So let's talk about a very prominent case of nomination trouble. Leela Aheer. So disclosure, I've got some history in this. It's one reason I know a fair bit about it, but there's a lot of news with this just today. Now, Aheer has never faced a nomination ever. She's been elected twice, but never had a nomination. When she was first elected on the Wild Rose banner in 2015, the party wanted a woman in an electable riding, and so essentially everyone else was elbowed out of the way to make room. She wasn't appointed, but was kind of elbowed out of the way. It was a bit cleaner than what happened in 2019, where she was one of only two members in the entire UCP, one of only two minorities, and Kenny had the party just disqualify anyone who wanted to challenge her. She was untouchable. He told me himself. No one was allowed to run against her because she would have lost that nomination. Now, this time around, she had a falling out with Kenny because she didn't get the right cabinet spot or something. She had a falling out for one reason or another. But that didn't mean that the anti-Kenny side would then adopt her, because she was opposed to Kenny on the left. She took more of an NDP line on lockdowns and mandates, thought we should have had stricter things on all this. And so she faced, for the first time, Kenny was no longer going to protect her. And so she has a nomination challenge there, Chantal DeYoung or something. Young woman, went around selling memberships. They had a local board election for the local UCP there. Aheer's board got trounced. All 30 positions thrown out, like 4-1. On a technicality, they had to hold a meeting again a couple months ago during the UCP leadership. Again, the Aheer board completely thrown out, including family members with her own name. Then she gets trounced around 1% or so in the UCP election, last place. She's not got the Smith people protecting her anymore. Sorry, the Kenny people. And the Smith people are definitely not going to protect her after the way that leadership race went, and not probably seen it as being of any great political value, getting 1%. So she's facing a real nomination, and she's not going to be protected. All signs were that she's going to get completely blown out. So we had an exclusive story that went up 8:30 this morning from our columnist, Linda Slobodian.
Yes.
Yeah, so Linda has this up. Now, this has been in the works for a few days. We had known about it. Sources very close to Aheer confirming she was sniffing around about moving ridings, going all the way up to Calgary Elbow. Voted UCP last time, but it's open right now. She was sniffing around there, but she probably would have had a very difficult time with the nomination even there. Probably a better suit of a riding. It's more lefty, more urban, but there's people who want that nomination, would probably win. And then today, we've got, she announces she's not running for the UCP next time. Although, am I reading too much into the language that she used? I'm not running for the UCP next time. Nigel, am I reading too much into that?
No, I don't think so. There's during the leadership, I always used to like Leela Aheer, and probably on a personal basis, I still do. But when she was involved in the early leadership debates, she had such strong language favoring the Alberta Teachers Union that I thought, this sounds more like the NDP. And, you asked the question, am I reading this? She's not going to run for the UCP. Well, who are you going to run for? Is it the NDP? Is it the NDP in Calgary Elbow? I don't know. It's whether they have a candidate there or not. But
I don't know. They do, because they've been chomping the bit to try and get that one.
Oh, okay.
Running.
Well,
Yeah.
So they have, yes. So she's going to look for maybe a.
But there's like some Northeast Calgary seats that are vulnerable where the UCP could lose it, where she could run for the NDP. I mean, we've kind of been wandering around here. We've all known she was not going to be a UCP candidate. As soon as she lost Kenny's protection, her time as a UCP candidate was pretty much over.
Yeah, she's not a strong conservative by any means, and that's why she had the trouble, I'm sure, in her constituency. That was a very large meeting that came and voted a new board, none of whom were favorable to Ms. Aheer. Like that was 450, 400.
I've never heard of
constituency
400
meeting.
people
That's
going to a local
big,
CHE.
yeah.
Never heard of that.
30 people who are hunched over a table.
Some
with
political
their
parties
coffee.
get that at their annual convention.
Yeah, it's so there was obviously a lot of, and she read the tea leaves, a dead right. They weren't with her. So then time to go look elsewhere. If she really wants to stay in politics.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I kind of agree. She is personable. When you see her in person, I like her, but I wouldn't say she's just a weak conservative. She's a weak politician, though. I mean, management of your constituency, for example, that's something you got to watch your flank as a politician, no matter what party you're in. And she let that fester and get behind her and couldn't get it under her own control. I don't know necessarily if the NDP wants Aheer. We can't presume that they would necessarily want her amidst them as well. Some people
they
said,
didn't want Sandra Jansen.
Well, look how that worked.
They took Sandra Jansen to say, hey, look, red Tory, we're the moderate, old progressive conservatives can come to us. I can see them taking her on those grounds. They might think, well, I mean, she's got a high opinion of the position she should hold in cabinet. She was, it was a poorly kept secret. The reason she was upset with Kenny was she didn't get a senior cabinet portfolio because she had been used to a more prominent position for one reason or another that didn't apply anymore. But it would probably be at least viewed as a win for the NDP. She might be a bit to handle, but
maybe it depends. I mean, it depends on their internal politics. Because I mean, you got to remember, you've always got to displace somebody else when you bring someone there. Yeah. And Jansen, I think actually Aheer is stronger than Jansen when it comes to that. At least Jansen left the NDP out to dry.
At least Aheer you can have a conversation with. Jansen was just not.
I missed her. She was so entertaining.
Oh. But this would allow the NDP to say we're the home of progressive conservatives.
Yeah, big tent.
We're big tent. Yeah. You may have voted PC before, but you could be with us. I mean, it's probably smartest for her to just not run. But if she was to pick, one of the weak UCP seats in Northeast Calgary, there's a couple that are pretty vulnerable. The NDP could pick up. She could move to one of those ridings and potentially win under the NDP.
Volatile country up there. I mean, anybody could win one of those potentially if you run the right campaign. And Northeast Calgary is quite a special pod. That.
What a mess. You know what? I half thought we should get into Paul Hinman and the Wild Rose, but maybe another time. I could only handle so much messy internal politics, and that one, I'm opening up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. And thank all of you for joining us this evening. I love spending time with you, as always. If you're already a member of the Western Standard, thank you very much. Your support allows us to continue building the Western Standard. Actually, it's our 3-year birthday.
Yes, it is.
Just, what was it? Yesterday, the day before. Although Friday, we're going to have a couple beers around the office, most of us. We're celebrating 3 years, and we've done it because of you. People signing up as members, $10 a month or $100 a year. That little bit goes a long ways in helping us to just grow the organization the way we have so tremendously over the last 3 years. So thank you very much if you're already supporting us. If you're not, shame on you. You're already supporting the CBC and the mainstream media with your tax dollars, because that's where it's going, and we're not taking it. So if you're not supporting the Western Standard and you're watching us, you probably like what you're seeing and you should support it. Although I am told on very good authority, the NDP caucus watch this, because this is how they find out what happens inside the conservative politics. This is where they figure out what's going on. So,
hi guys.
Even you NDP staffers up in Edmonton, I'm watching you right now. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.
Alberta Prosperity Project is dedicated to protecting Alberta's world-class energy sector and has invited Alex Epstein, American author of the best-selling new book, Fossil Future, to speak on the importance of fossil fuels and the vital role they play in our economy. Join us on Friday, October 28th at the Westin Calgary Airport for Beef and Beer with Alex Epstein. You will not want to miss this. Buy your tickets at www.albertaprosperity.com.